Candice, it's great to be back in the Illini Media Hub for a new episode of Candid Conversations. And it's a new day for our podcast because we've decided to invite other leaders to share their leadership journeys with us. And today I'm excited to welcome Dean Brooke Elliott to the show.
Thanks for having me today.
Absolutely. Brooke is the Joseph and Margot Lakonishak Professor of Business and the Dean of the Gies College of Business at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. Prior to her current role, Brooke served as Executive Associate Dean of Academic Programs and EY Professor, where she was responsible for providing strategic oversight of the Gies portfolio of academic degree and non-degree programs. Brooke also served as Associate Dean for Online Programs, where she was responsible for the development and execution of Gies strategy and online and head of the Department of Accountancy in Gies, leading one of the most innovative and highly ranked accounting departments in the world. Brooke holds a BS in accounting and an MBA with an accounting focus from the Indiana University Kelley School of Business. She earned her PhD in accounting from the University of Washington and joined the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign as a faculty member in 2003. Welcome to the show, Brooke.
Thank you so much.
So let's jump right in.
Sure.
And let's give our listeners and viewers an idea of how you describe yourself as a leader.
Yeah, so I describe myself as, first, it's all about transparency. So a transparent, bold, and empathetic leader. Those are the three terms that I would use to describe my leadership style. I mean, I think transparency is critical because you have to build trust. You can't get anything done within an organization if you don't have trust. Bold because I believe in leading through change. We really embrace innovation. I embrace innovation as a leader, and so you have to have bold ideas. The trust has to come first because you can't execute a bold idea without that trust. And then empathetic, and this is something that I think I've come into. So if you would have asked me a decade ago, I would have said I was a transparent and bold leader, and I would have left that empathetic descriptor off. But I've become an empathetic leader, and I think that is really critical because even though you build the trust, if you try to execute a really bold strategy, I mean, you're going to face challenges. Some people are going to love that environment and really rise to the challenge. Others may struggle through it, and you have to be empathetic to those individuals to, ensure that you're bringing them along with the strategic initiative and that they feel part of the team. And even those individuals who really embrace that boldness, sometimes they struggle as well, and they're surprised. And so like your ability as a leader to show empathy and to kind of understand the situation that they're in and how to help them navigate something maybe they've never navigated before. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of, that's how I think about myself as a leader.
Oh, fantastic.
Thank you.
That's a great description.
So since you're the dean over at Gies College of Business, Chris may be more familiar with this story, but can you tell me a little bit more about your journey, like what brought you to Illinois, and then what leadership lessons have you learned along the way?
Yeah, for sure. So I started here in 2003 as an assistant professor in accountancy. I always say we moved to Champaign. We're now on year 23 of a 2-year plan. And so, so my family's from the Midwest, but my PhD is from the University of Washington. So my husband and I lived on the West Coast. We love the West Coast, but Illinois is known for having one of the best accountancy programs anywhere in the world. So I thought this would be an amazing place to start my career, and then we'll make our way back to the West Coast. But we got here and we really loved it, and I really loved the university. I truly believe in our land grant mission, and we've just stayed. I throughout my academic career, if you would have asked me again, if we even roll back maybe 10 years, maybe a little before that, I would have said, I have the best job in the world as a tenured faculty member. I mean, what better job could you have? And sometimes I would joke with Jess and Hobson, who unfortunately is no longer with us, that, we have to keep it a secret because if anyone finds out how great our job is, it might go away. But I finished my PhD relatively young, and so I was a tenured full professor before I was 40. And I really started to think, what am I going to do with the next 20 years of my career? And when I started to think about that and how I wanted to make an impact, I started to think, well, maybe I was interested in exploring the administrative path. And that happened to coincide with whenever Jeff Brown became dean. he asked me to take an administrative role right as he was coming into the deanship. And my first administrative role was to evaluate our undergraduate core curriculum, build a faculty committee, propose a revised undergraduate core curriculum, and then build consensus and implement it. And I thought, well, how hard can that be? It's actually one of the most difficult things I've ever done as a leader. But what I found is, I was good at it. Like, I was good at the administrative side of things. And I really saw an impact that I didn't observe from a research perspective and even a teaching perspective. And so that kind of set me on an administrative path. And Chris, explained kind of what my path looked like. But it was just always taking on new administrative opportunities. And the more responsibility I took on, the more I found that I really loved it.
So were there any particular leadership lessons as you were falling in love with administration that you found?
Yeah. I mean, I think every single position that I had like a new leadership lesson. So the first one, whenever I was charged with evaluating our current undergraduate core curriculum and proposing and implementing a change, it was the importance of building consensus and how to build consensus amongst faculty, which is really, really hard. So I remember the first few months, I just literally, and this was pre-pandemic, right? So I literally was just going door to door and knocking and saying like, hi, I'm Brooke Elliott. I'm responsible for da-da-da-da. Can we have a conversation? And I was actually shocked at how effective that was in building relationships and then building consensus because many individuals said, well, no one has ever asked me that question. And what I found is even if they disagreed, or didn't fully agree with the plan we were putting forward, all they really cared about was that I took the time to get to know them, to listen to them, and to just input what they were sharing with me in the plan and acknowledging that. And so that was critical for me to learn. And that has served me like throughout. I mean, building consensus is a part of what every leader has to do.
People love to be listened to.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
And it's important because it's not just, it's not just giving, airtime to it. Like,
they feel valued.
They feel valued. And you actually learn, right? Like I learned in listening things that I didn't know right? And that's really important. And so I think that was most important. Whenever I became head of accountancy, it was the first time I ever managed a large faculty group. There are a lot of lessons in managing faculty. And so, it was learning how to build consensus, but it's really like, how do you lead and how do you get a group of individuals who have self-selected into pursuing individual pursuits to rally around a common mission? And that's probably what I learned most in that opportunity.
Thank you.
Yeah. So your journey has, I've been in the college about the same amount of time as your administrative leadership journey, and I've had this like great opportunity to witness your ascension all the way to the deanship, and it's been amazing. And you've been at the edge of our innovation and like the amazing growth that we've had as a college. Now that you stand here and we've kind of established ourselves as one of the preeminent business schools in the country, like, what do you think higher ed leaders need to be paying attention to now?
Yeah, so I think a couple of things. I mean, I think we have to embrace change, and higher ed is not known for embracing change. We did the same thing for a couple hundred years, and it worked relatively well. And so I think people really like to rely on that. But we have to embrace change, and I think change in a few ways. Change in terms of what we think our mission to be. I mean, one of the reasons I really love being at the University of Illinois is we are a land grant mission. And if you look at what is our land grant mission? And I summarize it as we're providing access to high quality education to individuals in our community, state, nation, and world, to all who desire it and really have the aptitude to pursue it. And whenever you think about it in that way, it doesn't mean we're only offering 4-year undergraduate residential degrees. It doesn't mean that we are only offering in-person graduate programs, right? It really starts to expand how you think about educating the world. And so I think about it very broadly. I've even started to change how we talk about the number of learners that we serve in Gies. It's not just the number of major students that we serve. It's not just the number of students that we serve, even in graduate programs, but we have non-degree learners, we have MOOC learners, right? And so I want to think about it from that perspective. So that's one thing. I also think we have to think about the learner differently. And I use learner purposely, not student. I talk about learners because whenever you talk about a learner as opposed to a student, it implies a relationship. And a relationship between the individual that's pursuing the education and then the faculty member that is also engaged in the learning process. One of the greatest things, if you talk to faculty who teach in our IMBA program, they'll tell you that they learn from the individuals in their course as much as those individuals in the course learn from them, right? So it's a dynamic relationship. So it really is about the learner, and most academics would kick me out of the room for saying this, but I think about learners as a customer. And I've thought about learners as a customer from very early on in my career. I actually remember I was a really good teacher, and so I got asked to speak at this academic conference about teaching, and I stood up in front of the most preeminent researchers in accountancy and said, I think about learners as customers. It was supposed to be you were supposed to commit to 1 year, and then you did it for 3. I never got asked back.
I can understand. Academic conferences.
That's exactly right. And so it's really because you have to meet the learner where they are, right? It's not us dictating what they need and then hoping that they come. So
especially now post-pandemic.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So you have a lot of experience. And I remember at one point aspiring to be a dean when I was doing my educational policy graduate stuff. But are there still things as a leader that you struggle to get right? And if so, I already kind of know, yes, that's a great answer. But what are those things?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of things I struggle to get right. I've only been in this role since August, and so it's still relatively new. I think a couple things is, I am a bold leader. I do believe in innovation, and it's trying to match the pace at which I want to move with the pace at which my team is ready to move. And I really struggle with that. I have struggled with it, I think, for a long time. I continue to struggle with it. I don't have a solution. So if anyone has some great leadership advice through these podcasts, I would love to hear it. But I think that's something that's really, really hard. And you can be a bold leader, but if you get too far out in front of your team, you're not going to accomplish what you want to accomplish, right? I mean, it is we, not I. Like, we accomplish it together. And so, that's one thing that I think I struggle with, and I really work to improve on through having conversations with my team, trying to let them know that they can be transparent and vulnerable with me, that if the pace is too fast, like, well, why is it too fast? Is it that, you have too much on your plate? Is it that your team is not structured in the right way? Is it that our goals are too aggressive? And so just trying to have those conversations.
Yeah, I like that self-awareness, that you're aware that you bring that energy and you bring that pace, but at the same time, you can be cognizant that not everyone is working at that pace.
Yeah, exactly.
So I've heard you talk about people that have been mentors to you over time. And in my experience, mentors are really good givers of feedback. So is there a piece of feedback that you've heard from a mentor or someone else that has been really tough to hear, but really ultimately made you better?
Yeah. So there's one piece of feedback that really sticks out, and it was that I have a tendency to surround myself with people who are like me. And that's true, like on reflection. But it was really hard to hear in a moment because it was a criticism of, at that point, like in my leadership role, it was a criticism of the team that I had built. And I thought, I thought I have the most amazing team. I handpicked them. Like, we're like really crushing it. But I had built a team of individuals like me. And I think it honestly comes back to the pace thing that we just talked about. I chose individuals that I knew could operate at my pace.
They could run with you.
Yeah, they could run with me.
Yeah.
But I didn't build a team of individuals that had complementary skills, right? And sometimes I need someone to like check me on my rapid pace, right? I mean, like that is value added. And maybe I say, I hear you, but we're still going to move at this pace. But the check is good. And so I think that's one one piece of advice, and I try to remember it, because again, like, it's a self-awareness in terms of the pace that I like to move at, and then the type of team that I need to build for us ultimately to be successful.
And I think that's when most of the learning happens on your end, when you get to build a team that's different from you.
Yeah.
I know when I'm like doing martial arts training and other things that there's so many people that are super fast. And I'm like, oh yeah, everybody needs to be like that. But I learned so much more from the person that has this grounded slowness about them, and then trying to meld those together.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly right. That's exactly right.
Yeah, we have better teams when we have a diversity of perspective and lived experience.
Yeah.
That's a simple fact.
Which is what I say all the time. Like, it's
Right,
one of my
yeah.
leadership lessons. And then I'm like, well, I should listen to my
But
own leadership lesson.
It's so easy to say that person understands me and we can move fast.
That's right.
It's a really hard thing to.
So it wasn't really out of left field. I mentioned martial arts because it's something that I do to keep me kind of grounded and when I move forward. So I wanted to ask about what habits or routines that you have that help you keep you grounded and focused as a leader.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm very much a habit person. And so I get up at 5:40 every morning. I have a group of 3 other women that I work out with. We work out 4 days a week at 6 a.m. We work out. I sauna for 20 minutes. I cold tub for 15 minutes. Like, I go back, I get ready, I drink AG greens, I have a Fairlife protein shake. Like, it is very regimented. I get in the office and I have tea. Like, that every single day. Like, that's what happens. It actually, now that I travel more in my dean role, like, it's thrown me. And so, like, I'm trying to figure out how I can ensure that I still, because that routine is very important. Is very important to me. I actually, this is kind of a silly thing, but like, I've worn the same pair of like pants over my workout shorts and jacket for maybe 15 years. Like, I don't change it. It's the same thing every morning, because I don't want to spend my mental capacity thinking about small things, right? I don't want to make those decisions in the morning. And so I don't have to. But that really keeps me grounded. And then I have 2 kids and they keep me grounded too.
So it's interesting to hear how you start your day. How do you, when you get in the middle of your day and the chaos hits, like what do you use to keep yourself like in that moment and grounded throughout the day?
Yeah. So, I play mind games with myself. And so I liken it to, if you've ever trained to like run a half marathon or a triathlon, right? Like, you're training from a running perspective. And at least for me, mentally, I'll be like, if I can just get to like this cross street or this stop sign, then I'll let myself slow down, when I know I'm not going to do that, right? Like, I'm going to get there and I'm going to keep going. So I do the same thing throughout the day. I'm like, if I can just get to 3 o'clock, like, I'll allow myself to take a break, to go and get a coffee, or if I want to go home and do the next call. Now, I don't do those things. I don't go take a break. I don't tend to go home, but I allow myself mentally to know that I'm going to allow myself the break if I really need it. And that really keeps me going throughout the day.
I know. I give myself little gold stars, Candice gold stars throughout the day.
Yeah,
you can take it if you need it, but then you end up not needing it.
But then most of the time I end up not needing it. I mean, every once in a while I do, right? And if I do, I'll take it. So
that's interesting. Knowing that you have the option of taking it is enough of a release for you to keep you going. That's amazing.
It's crazy. It's kind of.
Yeah, I might actually start using that. So you are now at the highest leadership position in our college, and by definition, furthest away from the front lines.
Yeah.
I have found as I've moved up in organizations and you get further away from the work that's being done, that there's a loneliness that sort of sets in, a disconnection that sets in. So do you sense that loneliness, and how do you combat it? How do you deal with it?
Yeah, this is a really lonely job. I think as I've moved from like leadership position to leadership position, like, they've become more lonely.
Yeah.
This one is really, really lonely. I combat it in a couple of ways. I have really strong mentors who are outside of the organization, but who have been in the role that I've been in. And so that's really helpful, and I trust them deeply, right? I could share anything with them, and it would not go outside of our conversation. So that is really helpful to me. I've also built even, within Gies, like I do have strong relationships. One of our associate deans I've known for 20 plus years. Yeah. And so that's helpful, because we can have conversations we were friends. And so we can have conversations. And the great thing about having someone like that is I'm talking to you as a friend, or I'm talking to you as the dean, and we can separate that space.
Yeah.
So I try to do it in ways like that. But the bottom line is leadership is lonely. It does help, I think, also to engage with peer groups. Like there is a strong Big Ten peer group of deans, and we're meeting together at a conference in February in Las Vegas. We're having a conference in April, and I found even connecting and planning for the conference, like it's nice just to talk to other individuals who are in your position, even if it's for just 15 minutes. So I think being purposeful though about having those conversations is important, because you kind of get lost in the job, and you forget that you actually do have individuals that you can talk to.
Now, we have lots of listeners and or viewers that are just starting out on their leadership journey. Do you have specific advice for those individuals?
Yeah. So like if I reflect, if I could have done things differently in the beginning, I would have been my authentic self from the beginning. I like on reflection, I was not. I'm very competitive. I'm a type A personality. Most of my life, like my friends have been men, not women. It's just like, I think it's just like my characteristics a lot of time are more similar to those that men display. And so what happened, I think, over time as I became a leader is I would tend to suppress like the characteristics that were more associated with being a woman, and just highlight those that were associated with being a man. And specifically in higher ed, like most of the time whenever I was at a table or part of an executive leadership team, I was the only woman in the room. I'm the first woman dean ever in the Gies College of Business. So it was just easier from an assimilation perspective, right, to do that. But what I started to learn and see is that I was not, part of the reason I wanted to be a leader is to demonstrate to other women that they could do whatever they wanted to do, that, they could be a tenured full professor, they could be an associate dean, right? They could be a dean. But while I was suppressing like what made me maybe most similar to that peer group, right? They didn't see themselves in me. And I didn't really recognize that. And so once I did, and actually someone gave me feedback once, and it was actually I would say a peer, and said, I don't think I could ever be like you because I'm not like you in so many ways. And I'm like, well, actually we're really similar. They're like, well, I don't see that. And that's where honestly, the empathetic side kind of came through, right? I've always been an empathetic individual and leader, but I think I just hit it. And so, but I think I would have been better off. And I definitely think like those that I was trying to influence and help would have been better off had I been an authentic leader from the beginning.
Do you think that it would have been well received by the audience that you were around?
That's the hard question, right? Like, I didn't do it because I didn't want to be my authentic self, but it's what I perceived in the moment that I needed to be successful. I think very early in my career, it would have been hard. In all honesty. And maybe I wouldn't be, it's the $1 million question. Like, would I be here if I'd been my authentic self from the beginning? I don't know. But I would like to create an environment where everyone can be their authentic selves and be successful.
So how do we do that? We have this phrase that we use at Gies that's seen, heard, valued. And we try to live that. But what do you do as a leader to really make that real for people at all levels in an organization?
I think... And I know that I want you to answer this question, but one of the things that I feel is happening now is that when people feel like they can't do that, if there's an ally or someone else in the room that has ascended a little bit more in their journey, they can help out in those regards. And so being more aware of how you can help that person along on their journey is impactful.
Yeah, so I think it's a couple of things. I think it's building a diverse college, and diversity in its broadest sense, right, in terms of lived experiences. And it's from a faculty perspective, a staff perspective, a leadership perspective, because I do think for individuals to be their authentic selves, they have to have the willingness to be vulnerable in a workplace. And that's really, really hard. And they're probably only willing to do that if they see others who are in some way like them. And so if you can build, I think, that diversity within the college. And Candice, is kind of to your point, they can find at least one person, and hopefully more than one person, that they feel comfortable being open with. And as that, I think as they have that, as individuals have that openness, and then that information kind of spreads throughout the college, and I think it affects the culture. I think it's also important for leadership, even though, you're right, I'm farthest away from kind of the front lines, but I try to ensure that I have real connections with individuals, that I have real conversations, and, that I share parts about me that maybe I otherwise wouldn't share. There's an individual on the budget team, and we had a joke this morning because he's a huge Vikings fan. He told me to bet on the Vikings. The Vikings did not play well last night. And so we had a conversation this morning. He's like, do I still have my job, right? But it's making those types of connections, right? Yeah. Because now we have honestly, because of that one interaction, we now have a different relationship, right? And we're going to talk about something different. And I think he's much more comfortable being open with me. So,
yeah, that's amazing. So a lot of times as leaders, we get in this mindset of, we know how it works, and then something hits us and we're like, wait, it doesn't actually work that way. So is there anything where you've had to really completely rethink an assumption about leadership, and what led to that shift?
Yeah. So I think, coming into this role, people have asked 6 months in or after the first 100 days, what were the biggest surprises, right? Mm-hmm. And there are actually several surprises. But one thing that probably threw me is I've been in the college for, to your point, a long time, right? I've had various leadership roles. I built a tremendous amount of trust. I've had success in every role that I've been in, but there's still as soon as I flipped from being executive associate dean to dean, all of a sudden there was this uncertainty. And it was it was uncertainty about what are we going to do as a college? What will the strategic priorities be? How will Brooke operate as a leader? Can I trust Brooke in this position? Will Brooke be successful in this role just like she has in every other role? And I kind of took it for granted, in all honesty. I'm because I have full confidence in myself. I've demonstrated it time and time again.
Why doesn't everyone else feel
why
the
doesn't
same
everyone
way?
feel it?
We got this.
We got this. And it was really, and I think what really threw me was it literally was a flip, right? It's one day I was I'm the same person as I was yesterday whenever we woke up, and we were talking about these same strategic priorities yesterday, and yesterday you were all in, and today you're not so sure. And I'm what? That doesn't make any sense.
I think it's there's this change that people then all of a sudden are like, okay, Brooke now has the ability to impact my life in different ways. And so there's an insecurity in that a little bit.
I think so. But, I on reflection, I understand it, but it threw me. It really did. And so then I had to take a step back and just ensure that I was having conversations, and again, building that foundational trust that I kind of just assume was there, and we could skip past it, right? But you can't. I think anytime you transition into a role, you have to go back to, it all starts with trust, and you have to ensure that you're on that same page and you have that foundational trust. So,
awesome.
So in the spirit of Candid Conversations, which is the title of this podcast, what's something that most people don't know about you?
So I'll choose a fun one and a serious one. Okay. So I thought about this. So a fun one, I love to gamble on sports. Just love it. So that's where the comment came earlier. Yeah. But I just find I love the risk of it. And maybe it's a little bit my escape because I dig in. I like to do research. I learn about the teams, right? I think about and I like the challenge of it, to see, can I be successful? Can I, beat the Vegas odds, right? Which, it's a coin flip overall, but it's really, really fun. And it gives me kind of an escape and a reason to I love sports. And so it gives me a reason to engage in sports in a different way. Yeah. And it's a time when I can actually take a mental break, from what I'm doing. So it's kind of an escape from that perspective. So that's the fun one. The serious one is, most people don't know that in 2022, I was diagnosed with cancer twice, and an infectious disease, all within a 12-month period. So
Wow.
it was a really crazy year. Not my best year. That's what I always say. Like 2022 was not my best year. And I also started a new leadership role. So I started the Executive Associate Dean of Academic Programs role in January of 22. Then a month later, I was diagnosed with cancer for the first time, a month later with an infectious disease, and then in October that following year, a different type of cancer. And so it was, but I thought, I wasn't sure I was going to share this today, but like in the spirit of like, I really think it's important for individuals, to be vulnerable as leaders. And whenever I think about, lessons to take away, it's if you are like, that's when learning happens, right? Whenever you as an individual are willing to be vulnerable, and as a leader, if you can demonstrate that vulnerability, others will be vulnerable back. And then amazing things can happen whenever you create that type of environment.
Yeah, I remember when I first had heard the news about that at the time, and you didn't skip a beat. Like it was like your leadership, it didn't seem to like publicly suffer, and that's like a big testament to like what type of a leader you are.
Thank you so much for sharing. I was going to ask, what lessons did you want our listeners to take away from that? And I was like, well, that's the lesson. So thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, it is. And so really my goal as a leader is, coming back to like, how do we create an environment where people are willing to be their authentic selves? It is like, how do you create an environment where people are willing to be vulnerable? And I think about that not just within our college, but honestly within like, we have work streams, and we've been talking about alumni engagement and how do we build engaged alumni communities around the world? And I think it comes down, I'm going to come back to vulnerability. It comes down to three things. It's networking, learning, and fun. But it's like, well, when are you willing to have fun? It's when you're in an environment where you can be vulnerable, right? Like that's when I have the most fun. And whenever you're having fun and you're willing to be vulnerable, you're most likely to network and learn, right? So it really brings it all together in terms of I think in terms of how it ties back to education and how being vulnerable really does create the best environment for anyone to learn.
It's a great recipe. It takes the right amount of vulnerability and
it's
the
secret sauce to connection.
Yeah, it is.
And connection really is the thing that makes us human.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
So Brooke, thank you so much for being on the show today. Our listeners and viewers are gonna just get so much out of this conversation. Really appreciate the time that you put into this.
Well, thank you. This was a ton of fun, and I really appreciate both of you and that you're doing these types of podcasts. I think it's awesome. So thank you.
Thanks, Brooke.